This story is about a 12th century love affair between Peter Abelard, and Heloise, a much older man, philosopher, very intelligent man, whom began to fall in love for this younger lady, Heloise. Throughout their journey of their love, they had a lot of turmoils, triumphs, and hurt, along with some people around them who didn't really care for their relationship for each other. This story is very remarkable for many reasons. Though Heloise was much younger, Peter found her to be extremely intelligent. He had found her to be so beautiful that he wanted to spend his life with her. It's one of those things where he kind of instantly knew that he loved this woman, this young lady. But because of the respect for her uncle, he tried to hide that love in the beginning. Her uncle hired him to be a teacher for her, to teach her about philosophy, because he was an astonishing philosopher. And throughout the story, Abelard begins to fall in love with Heloise like no other. He ended up giving Heloise a baby. She got pregnant, and the baby's name was Astrobal. The church officials are outraged that this couple had a child out of wedlock. And when their relationship is discovered, Heloise's uncle Fulbert, who is a church official, hires a gang to assault and then castrate Abelard. Once he recovers, Abelard learns that he had been exiled from Paris to Brittany, a sparsely populated region in North France, which was notable for cold and harsh conditions. Heloise then, in turn, decides that she chose to spend the rest of her life as a nun rather than to find another suitor or attempt to live with Abelard in his new state. While Abelard lives unhappily in northwest France, Heloise lives at the oratory of the Paraslate, which was a monastery that Abelard had founded in 1112 in north-central France. Over the years, Heloise's intelligence and hard work raised her position of abbess, the director of the abbey. The letters between them for years after their separation were immaculate. These letters discuss how these lovers had their memories of their love affair. It also talks about how Heloise wants to be with Abelard and she truly loves him, but she also knows that she faces challenges from Abelard of the things that he faced, which was Heloise recalls when she pointed out that he refused to recant his writings, and so his reputation was destroyed, and his books were ordered to be burned. She writes that letters have an ability to be more exact and express an individual than a photograph, and she is thankful for their correspondence through their writings. She also reaffirms the fact that she still loves him with all the tenderness of my soul to the last moment of my life. She writes so elegantly how she talks to him. But then there are times when you read other letters between the two of them where she's like bashing him and she's like so upset about the things that happened because she had to become a nun and give up her life to be a nun simply because of their love affair. And was that fair to her? No. She didn't ask for that. She didn't ask to fall in love with this man and feel the way she felt about him. He also, though, agrees with her that the absence can make a heart grow fonder. But like her, his experiences and his moments of intense hatred and love toward her begin to flourish. Because of her, his loyalty to God may not be absolute. And he suggests, even in the cloisters, that their passion of love for each other burns bright. He struggled with more than a decade trying to forget Heloise, but he has no luck and finally asks her for assistance in ending his memories and lust. Abelard continues to ruminate over the shame he feels in loving her. He wants to fulfill his duty as a priest, but has a distracted love for her, which continuously disturbed him and his inclinations of being a priest. In the third letter that he wrote, he points out that he thinks of saints and in his mind gives Heloise over to God. He points that God saves through suffering and that the separation brings them closer together spiritually and with God. Through this time, through their story, they were married, more so because Heloise's uncle kind of set them up in a sense where he acted like he was, he was in agreement with them getting married and things of that nature. And the whole time he just wanted Heloise to come back to his house. So, he showed some betrayal to both of them, but he felt betrayed from both of them. So he felt as though that was only right to do because he already felt betrayed by both of them for their affair that they were having with each other. And as the story goes on, and I have this picture of letters, and these letters are letters that were written by them. I think it was written by Heloise because of the heart, I want to say. But this story shows a lot about love and compassion for each other, and how people deal with tragedy. When you love someone and you can't be with them, how do you deal with that? It's hard. So Abelard first writes his letters, and he talks to Philantus, his friend, and he talks about, his hurt and how he feels ashamed by what has happened. And he didn't mean to fall in love with her, but it kind of happened. She was beautiful, and she was younger and she was smart, and he admired so many things about her. He proposed to her and she didn't. She said no. She was like, I'm not getting married to him, because she didn't want her marriage to him to stop him from progressing through his studies. So instead, she proposes to him that she becomes his mistress. This idea was shared by Abelard's sister, Lucilla, who tells that for Heloise, marriage will be a tomb. Heloise's uncle found out about the secret relationship and punished him, mutilating him and castrating him. He went back and forth with, doing different things to kind of like ruin their relationship, because he didn't like this relationship. And during these times, these relationships weren't the best of relationships to have. It wasn't as something that didn't happen. It's just something that people didn't make a big deal about, and they kind of keep it, try to keep it like down low, like, this wasn't really happening. And in these days and time in the 21st century, people do it all the time. Does that make it right? Absolutely not. At first, when I first read it, I kind of was like, I don't like this, because I felt like, he fell in love with this young girl and kind of ruined her life. But as you read through the story more, it's just it's so sad, because it's true love. And people will go through hoops to be, in love with each other and to have these relationships. And, in this day and time, when you see an older man with a younger woman, you instantly think, oh, he don't really love her, or she don't really love him, and they're using each other. But this was a story of nothing of that in any way. This woman really loved this man, and she really wanted to be with him, and he really wanted to be with her. And due to the things that had taken place in these times, it wasn't the easiest thing. More so because Abelard was really like a big deal. He was a philosopher. He contributed to a lot of history, to philosophy, and his life was like going in shambles because he started this affair with this young woman. And culturally, I think I can relate and understand it, because in Islam, one of the prophets, Muhammad, he had married his wife Aisha when she was like 6 years old. And they didn't consummate the marriage until she was much older, maybe 12 or 13. But in fact, they were married when she was a young age. But in that instinct, he did a lot of that because he wanted to really give her Islam. He wanted to teach her Islam. He wanted to mold her. He had intentions on making her be one of the best in the Sahaba in Islam. So that was his reasoning, for doing that. And he allowed Aisha to be who she was. She played with her dolls and her friends. He even chimed in and played with her dolls and her friends as well. But when you look at this story about Heloise and Abelard, he goes on to tell her that they need to focus on God, and I feel like he came to that realization because they couldn't be together the way that they wanted to. So his mindset was, let me, try to find a spiritual aspect, because he loved this woman just so much. This story is nothing shy of amazing. It's an amazing story. The letters are amazing to each other. Their love for each other, their compassion, their feelings for each other. It's a very, very hard thing when you love someone and you can't really be with them. And people can, I'm sure, can relate to some level on this story. And would I recommend this story? Absolutely. Anybody that's interested in philosophy, anybody that's interested in history and humanities, this is definitely a story to read and to know about. I didn't have any idea about the story until I actually took this class. I think it's an excellent story. It taught me a lot just about, just even how they lived in those times, and being in Paris and the things that they experienced. And, Paris is the country of love. And, Heloise was a very strong-willed and gifted woman. She was fluent in Latin, Greek, and Hebrew. She came from a lower standing socially than Abelard, but at age 19, when she was living with Fulbert, which was her uncle, she fell in love with Abelard. She couldn't help that. They were studying, and it became a sexual affair, and they loved each other. They had Astrobo out of wedlock, which was totally wrong in those times. I mean, people do it every day now, have children out of wedlock, and you don't think too much about it. But in these times, you were supposed to be married, and you were supposed to be on the up and up with things, and it's just a sad story, but it's an amazing story. I learned so much just from reading this story about their love for each other and their compassion and their feelings, and how she talks to him, and she even joked with, I don't think she was joking, I think she was serious when she was like, I'll be your mistress. Like, she loved him just that much. She couldn't fill that void with anybody else. She didn't want to, but at the same time, she also knew the consequences that were from behind it, and that's what she wanted to avoid. And Abelard, he came from a pretty well-off family. His family wasn't poor or anything. He was a great leader. Evelise was just, she was just starting out. She was pretty young. She wasn't really, she didn't know a lot about life. And Abelard, through just loving her, he was able to teach her many things. He went on and died in the year 1142. He was 63 years old. And 20 years later, she died. And she was buried by his side over in Père-Lachaise, where their tomb can now be seen. Their tomb is an amazing sight to see. I actually have a picture of it. I think it's beautiful. It's said that, just from research, I read different articles that said that at one point they weren't buried together, and then they were buried together, and now they're over here. Nobody really for sure knows. It said that they're in Paris, France. And I actually have this picture of what's supposed to be their remains are in these coffins. And these are just stamps that I actually just kind of put together. And then here on the back, I had a quote where he said, "If I am remembered, it will be for this, that I was loved by Heloise." Abelard. He truly loved this woman. And these are just some pictures of them in different scenes that I found. One thing that stuck out to me the most throughout the story was their letters. They were amazingly written. They were written in such pretty paper and on this beautiful with this beautiful ink, and it just it points out their love for each other, and they talk about everything. She banishes him, she hates him, she loves him. He hates her because he hates how he feels for her. He wants to get over her. Wasn't that easy though, and he lived unhappily throughout those times when he became a monk and things like that. And it was sad for the two of them. And then, years later they reunited, and they still had that same love for each other. And, they looked at each other and they admired each other, but it wasn't quite the same. And that didn't last very long. But here's a picture of the tomb. I just think it's an amazing tomb of their lives, that they were able to be together in the end. Somehow, some way, they were able to be dead together. So that's my summary. It's Stephanie Cheeks, Humanities 101 video project.